Welcome to a play-by-play review. I am your host, Henry, and once again, I'd like to wish everyone who celebrates a happy Thanksgiving, as this past week was, in fact, one of the biggest holidays in America. Thanksgiving is obviously a big family holiday, and it's also a big football holiday, as we get 3 games on Thursday instead of one. We always will get a not a Packers game, a Lions game. This time it was against the Packers. We'll get to that in a sec. But a Lions game in Detroit and a Cowboys game in Dallas. That's just Thanksgiving traditions. It's also sort of the unofficial John Madden holiday, although it's kind of a semi-official holiday now that the NFL is kind of pushing towards. So the late, great John Madden, who was a Super Bowl winning coach with the Raiders back in the 70s, then went into the broadcast booth and was a mainstay in the broadcast booth for decades. He's kind of the voice of Thanksgiving, and since his passing a few years ago, the NFL has kind of honored Thanksgiving as sort of an extension of his legacy, which I think is very sweet. We'll get to the Thanksgiving games here in a sec. So just kind of general notes about this week. It was an interesting one. We once again it's very chaotic, to say the least. This is a week where everyone plays. There were no bye weeks this week. I was a little wrong last week when I said that it was the end of the bye week. So it was just that this past week, there were no bye weeks, but week 14 will have a couple teams. I know the Patriots are on a bye. I think there's one or two other teams on a bye as well. But I believe next week is the last week of bye weeks, since we are now in December. There's a lot of sloppy football. Some really good games. Honestly, two of the 3 Thanksgiving games were good. The night game was okay in terms of like the level of competition, but again, we'll get to that. It just felt like, especially once it got into Sunday, there were just a lot of turnovers all over the place. There were a lot of special teams mishaps. Some interesting kicking moments. We'll get to the Monday night game and the the fail there with Young Wei Koo, but it was overall a pretty entertaining week of football. So we'll dive straight into the Packers going to Detroit to take on the Lions on Thanksgiving, and the not the 12:30 game, which like it feels like it's always been 12:30 as the start of the first game. This time was at 1 o'clock, which is a little weird. I'm not really sure why, but I don't know. It started a little bit later, but it was either way the early game for Thanksgiving. And the Packers were 7-4 going into this. The Lions were 7-4 going into this. The Packers were 8-2-1 and atop the division, I believe is what they were going into this. And the Lions had lost to the Packers in week 1 in a pretty lopsided game, although both teams had gone through a lot going into this week. So it was a highly anticipated rematch. And early on, it was an interesting one, to say the least. Amon-Ra St. Brown got injured, I think, on the first drive where he got his ankle rolled up. There's also a story where Frank Ragnow, the longtime center for the Detroit Lions, who had retired after the end of last year, had announced he was coming out of retirement going into this week, though he wasn't going to be playing this week anyway, just because he would need to take a couple weeks to get into shape. However, unfortunately, he did not pass his physical because he has his foot basically exploded on him, I think. And so he is now going back into retirement because his foot is not operable on a football level. And he's basically dealing with another really unfortunate injury. It just kind of really sucks for him. I feel horrible for that. But either way, it's Frank Ragnow will not be returning to the Lions, unfortunately. And that just that and the Amon-Ra St. Brown injury just kind of summed up their game, where it didn't seem like a lot could go right for the Packers. It went back and forth for a little bit. The Packers' legion of wide receiver 2s showed up once more, where it feels like a guessing game or like a shell game where you never know who it's going to be, who's getting like the main targets. Like one day it's going to be, or 1 week, I should say, it's going to be Romeo Doubs. Another, it's going to be Jaden Reed. Another could be, I don't know, Matthew Golden, although I know he's had a pretty rough start to his career and he was injured going into this game. This week, though, it was Dontavian Wicks, who had, I believe, 2 touchdowns in this game. Jordan Love had a very solid game, probably one of the best he's had this season, because Love has not had the best season overall from a numbers and a quarterback standpoint. Like, I know the Packers have a good record, and I'm not discounting that whatsoever. But it's been a lot. Like, they've leaned heavily on the run game, and they've also leaned heavily on their defense a lot. Again, reiterate Micah Parsons. But this was one where Jordan Love definitely put the team on his back on this one. He had 4 touchdowns this game, was playing pretty good, efficient football this whole time. The Packers' offensive line was having a good game. And it was just one where you could tell that even though the Lions would, come back in this game at points, the Packers were in control for most of it. And it just felt like they were the better team throughout most of this game. And they're 8-3-1 now. The Lions are 7-5, and this is very huge for the Packers since they sweep the division series against the Lions. And while we'll get to who's actually leading the division in a little bit, it's still a very big, really huge for the Packers for their playoff consideration, because they're on the inside track at the moment for at least getting into the playoffs, much less winning the division, and it's very key for them. So they're in a very comfortable spot at the moment, even if they haven't always played their best ball. I know Josh Jacobs has been dealing with injuries. Tucker Kraft, obviously, after the season. I know Devontae Wyatt on their defensive line, he got injured, I think, in this game. It was either this game or the last game. Either way, it was he's out for a good bit. And so it's not all sunshine and roses for the Packers, but it's, I'd say, more sunshine and roses than not, especially compared to the Lions, who, while they are 7-5, they've obviously lost both of the Packers, and the luster that they've had compared to last season has worn off a bit. They're still good. They're just not quite the same team that they were last year. Their defense hasn't played amazing. I know they've been dealing with a lot of injuries in the secondary, like Terrion Arnold not playing a lot, and I think some of their other cornerbacks have been dealing with injuries, and obviously the Amon-Ra St. Brown injury doesn't help either. But it's one where overall the Lions, I don't know why I keep saying the wrong team between these two. I need to stop that. But overall, the Lions they're just not quite the same team. They're, I think, 0 for their last 7 on going forward on 4th down, and this is a team that loves going forward on 4th down. They're the Dan Gamble team, That was kind of their thing last year, was that they would go for it on 4th down all the time and usually succeed. And right now they're not doing that. So it'll be interesting to see how this team adjusts. Like, if they continue trying to, if it's going to continue with this kind of sunk cost fallacy type of deal, or if they're going to try and change things up a little bit going into this last month of the regular season. Anyways, moving on, the Kansas City Chiefs, who were 6-5 and out of the playoff hunt, or on the outside looking in, going into Dallas, who were 6-4-1, or I should say 5-5-1. I read that wrong. They were 5-5-1. So 2 middle of the road teams record wise, facing off in it kind of was the narrative going into this, was that it was a must-win game for both teams. And, whoever comes out of this is looking much better going into December and trying to get into the playoff hunt compared to whoever would have lost it. And surprise, surprise, the Dallas Cowboys come out with a win, 31-28. I don't remember if I stated the final score of the Packers-Lions game. It was 31-24 Packers. This game, the winning team also won with 31 points. The Cowboys winning 31-28. And it was interesting because it started out real rough for the Cowboys, where Dak Prescott threw an interception. The Chiefs had, I think, a good kickoff return, and they scored 14 points early. And it looked like pretty early on that the Chiefs were going to run away with it. But after that, the Chiefs kind of stalled out. The Cowboys kind of clawed their way back into it. The Chiefs, like after their first two touchdowns, I think basically punted on like the next 5 drives or something like that. Like they just completely shut down. So credit the Cowboys defense. They played a pretty solid game. The Chiefs scored 0 points in the second and third quarters. And while the Chiefs did score another 14 in the fourth, it wasn't enough. And the Cowboys just were a bit more consistent overall. Really, after that first interception that Prescott threw, he had a pretty solid game overall. He had 320 yards, 2 touchdowns. CD Lamb had a good game. George Pickens, not quite the games that he has been having this season, but when you're comparing to amazing to just like good, it's good looks bad by comparison. The Chiefs in this game were really struggling with staying disciplined. They had a lot of penalties called against them. Some warranted, some maybe not, but you can always argue that the refs just suck. And I think this week and really this season, the referees were they've been so bad. We're going to get to the Sunday night game here. The refs have been so bad this year. But overall, I'm a Washington fan. I don't like the Cowboys whatsoever. I really don't like them. I got to give credit to them. They played a good game, and they're really keeping their playoff hopes alive. They're just a couple games, I think 2 games back at the moment from the Eagles in the division. So the division title in the NFC East is very much up for grabs at the moment, and I'll go into more why in a second with the Eagles game because they played on Friday. I have the Bengals-Ravens game to cover after this, but I'm no fan of the Cowboys. But I will say they've been playing a lot better over the past few weeks compared to what they have been, early in the season. Really outside of that Cardinals game on Monday night, they've had a good stretch of football, which I've been a little surprised. I've been surprised at how much better their defense has been playing. A large part of that has been Quinnen Williams. And I wasn't surprised that he's playing well. Quinnen Williams is a fantastic player, and I said it when they traded him that he was going to improve the Cowboys' defense. I just wasn't sure that they needed another defensive tackle. I figured that they needed an edge rusher since that's the position they've been lacking since they traded away Micah Parsons. Apparently, Quinnen Williams just has become their edge rusher, essentially, or more their star pass rusher because he has as many quarterback hurries, I think, or something or quarterback pressures in the 3 games he's been in Dallas that he had in 8 games with the Jets this season. I'm pretty sure that was the stat either going into this week or coming out of it. I don't remember exactly, but it was basically Quinnen Williams has been playing incredibly well in terms of rushing the passer. And he's been the key that the Cowboys defense has needed to maybe not play like in a top 10 level, but not play in a bottom 10 level or even like a bottom 5 level as they had been playing. So I don't like praising the Cowboys. Once again, I am a Commanders fan and the Cowboys are annoying. But I will give credit where credit's due. They've had a successful couple of weeks here and they're looking a lot better than they did early in the season. As for the Chiefs, because I should, mention it, they are 6-6 on the outside looking in. They're really struggling in away games and in one-score games, and this is definitely not the same Chiefs team that we've seen over the past couple of years. Once again, I still wouldn't count them out because it's like same with the Brady-led Patriots. Really at any point in his career, but especially in the 2010s, you can never count them out. I'm never going to count out Patrick Mahomes or Andy Reid. But at the same time, they're 6-6, and they're definitely looking to be a lot worse than they have been. And they're like, I wouldn't say they're a lot worse than they were last year because I'd say they're a somewhat similar team than they were last year. They're just not getting the good fortunes that they were last year, where they're not winning one-score games, nearly as much as they were last year. Once again, they were 11-0 in one-score games last year. They're, I think, now 1-5. Or 1-6, something like that, in one-score games this year. So that's a big part of it for why they're 6-6. But they're a team that they just seem to be lacking the same kind of oomph that they've had in years past. They could go on a run, but at this point in the season, I could probably see them making a wild card spot, but I don't see them winning the division. Like they're just down too many games at this point compared to the Broncos, and I just don't see them playing well enough to make it. Definitely not making it to the Super Bowl, even like winning a playoff game. They just don't seem to have enough at the moment. But who knows? That could change in a month. Now then to the late night game on Thursday, the Cincinnati Bengals going into Baltimore to take on the Ravens. And this was an interesting one because obviously the narrative for Baltimore was that they started off 1-5, dealt with a lot of injuries, but then went on a huge run once they got Lamar Jackson and a lot of their defensive players back. So it was the Ravens who had all the momentum in the world to really keep rolling and get a big divisional win and really secure the AFC North going into December, hosting the very much struggling Cincinnati Bengals. However, the biggest story of this was that Joe Burrow was back for this game. And for some reason, that also spurred the Cincinnati Bengals defense to have the game of their life, and the Ravens offense and their offensive game plan to have a brain fart, essentially. Because the Cincinnati Bengals won, and not only did they won 32-14 in an incredibly one-sided game, as the Ravens turned the ball over 5 times, and I believe all 5 of them were fumbles. Lamar Jackson had a really bad case of just turning the ball over, or like losing the ball at the most inopportune moments early on where, well, it was more, there was one moment where early on in the game, he was getting pressured towards his own goal line and tried to like transfer the ball, and the ball just kind of slipped out of his hands, and the Bengals recovered the fumble. There was also a point in this game where Lamar Jackson threw a long pass to Isaiah Likely, and it looked like he was going to score a touchdown, but he got caught by a Bengals defensive back, I don't remember who it was, and got the ball stripped out of his hands and fumbled through the back of the end zone for a touchback. I'm not exactly faulting, I'm not saying, or I'm not going to say Isaiah Likely pulled a Deshaun Jackson there, because it wasn't the same where like he deliberately slowed up and like dropped the ball before the end zone. It was more just a really impressive play by the Bengals defensive back, who again, I don't remember who it was, but a really impressive defensive play by the Bengals defensive back to strip the ball out and force a touchback. And it was just one of the many plays they made in that game. I think Zay Flowers had 2 fumbles, and it was very much a one-sided game for the Bengals, which I certainly wasn't expecting. I was expecting the game to be close. I was not expecting this to be a blowout in favor of the Bengals. Joe Burrow looks solid in his return. The Bengals offensive line was probably the biggest surprise, because I don't know if they let up a single sack this game. I'm actually going to double check. They basically let up next to no pressures. Joe Burrow got sacked 1 time. And if you've paid a little bit of attention to Burrow and the Bengals over his entire career, the offensive line has been atrocious. Like, he's been just constantly hammered by sacks his whole career. This season, even in the few games he's had included. And the Ravens, while their pass rush has this year not been the best, they've been improving over late. And this game, they kind of reverted back to their early season form where they just could do nothing. And I'm just very surprised at how poorly the Ravens played this week. Because it's like, I know they do tend to lay an egg on occasion, especially later in the season in important games, but it's still one where I'm surprised at how poorly it was. Like the Bengals run game was good, and the run game's usually been pretty bad. The Ravens basically didn't use Derrick Henry at all. Like, I think he had 10 runs total. And I know they fell down early in terms of points, but even then it wasn't like a lot. And he's still Derrick Henry. Like, I don't think he ran the ball once in the third quarter. Like, it was so strange. And I don't know. And it's beyond me. Either way, the Bengals are somehow still alive. They somehow still have a chance to win the division because the AFC North is so incredibly mid this year. Obviously, the Browns are kind of out of it. at this point. The Steelers are also incredibly mid, and the Ravens are record-wise mid. They're 6-6. The Bengals are only 2 games back at 4-8. The Bengals and the Ravens still play each other, I think, in 2 weeks. So I'm not saying the Bengals are going to do it. I'm just saying there's a somewhat believable chance that the Bengals could sneak into the playoffs by kind of running the table here and getting some fortune from their division rivals losing. Just keep an eye out on that, is all I'm saying. Now for the Black Friday game between the Chicago Bears going into Philadelphia to take on the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. And the Eagles, obviously, they were coming off of that Monday night loss to the Cowboys. And, I've been very critical on the Eagles, and there definitely been some question marks, but this was kind of supposed to be that prove-it game where, they were more like the noise is all just noise, and they are, defending Super Bowl champs for a reason, and they were an 8-3 team, and they were supposed to look like an 8-3 team. To my incredible delight, that did not happen in the slightest. I am by no means a Bears fan. I don't mind the Bears team. I like Caleb Williams because, again, he's local to the DC area, and like in the sense that he, as a Washington fan, I like him as well. I got nothing against Caleb Williams. Their fan base is very annoying. It has been very annoying ever since the Caleb and Jaden went 1 and 2 overall, and it's a whole social media thing, and it's whatever. I am by no means a Bears fan. I was very much a Bears fan this week. And oh boy, did the Bears absolutely embarrass the Eagles, because the Eagles, they lost. It was by a score of only 24-15, but this game was pretty one-sided the whole way through. The Eagles looked really, really rough going through this whole game. And it was kind of an everything problem. Like, there was not just one thing in particular. Since a lot of the criticism for the Eagles and like where a lot of people are like pointing to the problems of like this is the only problem we have right now, since a lot of people are doing that, is at Kevin Patullo, the offensive coordinator for the Eagles, who took over after Kellen Moore went to go become the head coach of the Saints after the Super Bowl. Kevin Patullo is part of Nick Sirianni's system. I don't remember which job he had before being promoted to offensive coordinator, but he's had a lot of the blame throughout this season for the repeated offensive struggles that the Eagles have had. And I'm not going to deny that Kevin Patullo has done a bad job. It's just that no one else on the team for the Eagles this week did a good job either, really. Except for, of course, A.J. Brown. 2 weeks in a row, the Eagles' offense overall does pretty poorly. They lose in pretty embarrassing fashion, but A.J. Brown has a really good game after the whole saga of him complaining about not getting the ball and the whole drama there. So I don't know. It's just kind of ironic there. But in this one, the Eagles' defense did not play well. The Eagles' offense did not play well. The Eagles' coaching did not do well. You can even say Howie Roseman did not do a good job this week, because the Bears, who were fielding multiple former Eagles in DeAndre Swift, their running back, Kevin Byard, their safety, and hang on one sec, I'm blanking on the third, but it's going to come back to me in a second here. And it was C.J. Gardner-Johnson. That's who was the third one I was thinking of. But all three of them made their presences felt in this game. DeAndre Swift had a really nice time rushing the ball. Actually, both Bears running backs, Swift and Kyle Monangai, were just feasting this game. And Kevin Byard had an interception. C.J. Gardner-Johnson had a couple plays here and there and was really talking smack this whole game. Monangai had 22 carries for 130 yards and a touchdown. DeAndre Swift had 18 carries for 125 yards and a touchdown. So between those two alone, that's over 100 or 250 yards rushing. And this is an Eagles team that has usually been pretty good at defending the run, and they just got gashed this whole game. Like the opening drive, the Bears were just running all over the Eagles. And this is one where Caleb Williams didn't even really need to do much. He didn't have a spectacular game. He only threw for 154 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Got sacked twice, so finished with 144 yards. But still not like this was not the Caleb Williams game. This was the Bears running attack and their defense just having their way with the Eagles offense, because the Eagles offensively, they could not get the run going whatsoever, and that has been a theme of the season. I know Lane Johnson's been injured on the offensive line, and that's clearly been an issue over the past 2 weeks for the Eagles. But even before that, they just have not been able to get Saquon Barkley going at all. Like, talk about a regression. And in terms of just pure statistics, Saquon has been a shell of himself this year. I'm not saying he's like fallen off the map like talent wise, but it's clear that this is not the same team that it was last year when it comes to running the ball. I think also part of that, besides the offensive line not playing nearly as well as they did last year, is that the Eagles have not been calling a lot of design runs with Jalen Hurts. And that's something that the commentators on in the actual games have been harping on a good bit, is that design runs with Jalen Hurts, which clearly work. Like they did it in this game, and they had one really good design run with Hurts in this game. He ran for like 30 yards on their touchdown drive they had early in the game. Or might have not been a touchdown drive, but I think it was a scoring drive this game. It was one that worked, and I don't know why they don't do more of it, because Hurts is as good with his legs as he is with his arm. Or I should say he is as much of a threat with his legs as he is with his arm. Like he is a very good runner, and it's clear that when when they run more, say, RPOs or design runs with him, it's clear that it opens up the offense more, both in the passing and rushing attacks. So why they don't do that is beyond me. But even with trying to just kind of make Jalen Hurts a pocket passer, he was not having a good game this game, to be honest. There were a lot of throws that he missed, like deep balls. He was not having a good time with. There's one pass that people have been highlighting a lot, really ever since it happened, where they were on like their own 30 or 40 yard line, and Hurts basically just missed Devontae Smith, who was open, just missed it behind him. And not only was Devontae Smith open, basically everyone else was as well. Like if he had just looked to the right, he would have seen Dallas Goedert like wide open in the middle of the field, basically, or like on the right hash of the field, essentially. And if he threw to him, it would have been a walk-in touchdown. And it's just kind of the microcosm of this passing attack has not been the same. And really, outside of the occasional jump balls that Jalen Hurts throws, where he'll basically just toss it up and hope one of his receivers makes a play, and they usually do. It's an offense that just has not been good. And it got exposed 2 times in a row now on primetime. And there's a lot of questions being thrown about of like basically who to blame. And I'd say everyone. Like no one is safe, because I mean, outside of AJ Brown playing well this past few weeks, like Saquon's not playing well, the offensive line's not playing well, Jalen Hurts is not playing well. Devontae Smith has been fine as well. I'd say like the wide receiver group is probably like the least to blame. The offensive coordinator has not been good. Nick Sirianni has not been doing a good job. Like I legitimately have no idea what he does on this team, because it's clear he doesn't run the offense, or at least it like does not seem to have a ton of input on the offense, or like because it seemed to be more the Kevin Patullo offense rather than the Nick Sirianni offense, because it's very different from what it was last year. And he obviously doesn't run the defense because Vic Fangio runs the defense. And he's one that I wouldn't say you should blame too much if you're an Eagles fan. But I genuinely don't know what Nick Sirianni does at this point as a head coach, because it just seems like this Eagles team is just treading water, and they think they're a lot better than they actually are, because they may be 8-4, but they're a bad 8-4 at the moment with how they've played over the last couple weeks. They could turn things around. It's like similar to the Chiefs, where like I'm not saying they're dead, like I'm not saying they're out of this. They obviously still have the inside track to the division easily, I might add. They just need to win a couple more games, but that's still a big question mark with how poorly they've been playing on the offensive side of the ball. And so the Eagles are only a couple games ahead of the Cowboys, but it's still a toss-up. The Bears, however, are now 9-3 and are the best team in, or well, they're now leading the NFC North, and I'll get to a little bit more after I go over some of the Sunday night games. But yeah, the Bears are leading the NFC North after Thanksgiving, which I don't think anyone was expecting, or anyone. I'd say 90% of people, I would say, were expecting going into this season. Now on to the Sunday night, or not or Sunday night, just these Sunday games in general. And there were some good, I'd say, but overall, not all of them were all that good. To start off, the San Francisco 49ers went into Cleveland to take on the Browns, and this is Shedeur Sanders' second career start, I think. I think he started last week as well. And yeah, it was a second start. And unfortunately for Shedeur and the Browns, their offense did not have the same fortune that they did last week against the Raiders, nor did their defense. The San Francisco 49ers won quite handily, 26-8. And it was a very windy game and pretty one-sided. It was just not all that interesting. The Browns offense could get very little going. Shedeur did not have a very good game. Quinshon Judkins was really like the only guy on the Cleveland Browns offense that seemed to show up. He finished with 91 yards on 23 carries, but it was not nearly enough. Like Shedeur had a couple good passes. His one touchdown pass to Harold Fannin Jr. was pretty good, but it was overall one where this outcome was pretty expected. The Niners definitely played one of their better games over the past couple weeks. It didn't seem like they had any big injuries as well, which is good for them. Purdy didn't have his best game overall, but very much good enough to win. And it was just one where the better team clearly won. The Niners are now 9-4, and with all the injuries they've had is very impressive. So they're very much still in it to win it in that incredibly tight division race out in the NFC West. So I'm very impressed with how the Niners have been playing, given everything that's happened. They just have a really good roster and really good coaching staff. And it's like, you can tell by watching this game, there's levels to the NFL in terms of like coaching ability and just level of play overall. there was a little bit of a funny-ish, I'd say pretty funny story that comes out of this. So, one thing that I meant to mention last week, but I forgot to mention, was in the Monday night game. Or it might have been 2 weeks ago. I think it was last week, but it was the Panthers and the Niners who played. There was an incident in that game where oh my God, the 49ers wide receiver, Jawan Jennings, got punched in the balls by Panthers safety Trayvon Merrick. And it was like clearly caught on video, and it caused a fight after the end of after kneel downs and all that, where Jennings and Merrick got into it, because it like happened right at the end of the game, and it was a whole thing. And it was like, yeah, it's like Merrick got suspended for a game, and it's like, oh yeah, he deserved it. And it's like, why would you punch him in the balls? It's like, come on, man. But coming into or after the game this week, Browns defensive tackle Shelby Harris was being interviewed in the locker room post game, and somehow it got on the topic of Jawan Jennings or something along the lines. And Harris referred to Jennings as something that I'm not going to repeat on here because I want to keep this clean. It was a derogatory term for a woman that it can also be used to describe a piece of farming equipment, I should say. But then he said the line of, yeah, he deserved to get punched in the balls last week, or something along those lines, essentially, which is absolutely wild to say. And apparently it's that that Jawan Jennings is like a real big trash talker, and not in like the good way. Like he gets under people's like players' nerves very quickly and like saying things that probably shouldn't be said. Don't know what it is, but it's like it's absolutely wild that like like it's you watch most post game interviews. And they're usually just like if it's a win, they're talking about like, oh yeah, we played well and whatnot, and, credit to the team, credit whatnot. Or if it's a loss, it's like, yeah, we got to play better, things didn't go our way, whatnot. This one's no, like Shelby Harris, like, yeah, he totally deserved to get punched in the balls. I understand why. And it's like, okay, there's something going on here. It's one of those things where you just kind of watch it and go, oh, that's pretty funny. It's just one of those sound bites that it's like, this is gonna get replayed on occasion, and it's like you want to be a fly on the wall of like what's going on in those dog piles on the field, because there's got to be stuff being said that's like it's got to be absolutely crazy. But anyway, that was just it there. Other than that, that's like the only funny thing or only really interesting thing that I feel like happened in this game was Shelby Harris saying that in the post game interview. Now to move on to an equally boring game. The Jacksonville Jaguars going into Tennessee to take on the Titans. Titans obviously have one win. They still have one win after this game. The Jags handedly beat them 25-3. And the Jacksonville Jaguars now somehow... actually, I'll save that for the next game. No, I say that. I'll save that. But the Jags are now 8-4. They won this game very easily. Trevor Lawrence had a pretty solid game. It wasn't anything spectacular, but I mean, again, the Titans have a pretty solid overall defense. Once again, Jeffrey Simmons is elite, but the Titans just have barely anything going on offense and are going to need a whole new search going on in the offseason to get a lot of talent on the offense side of the ball. And it's clear that that they need a lot more. Once again, they only score 3 points here. And I'm not going to try and like extend this out all that much. It was a very one-sided, pretty boring game. Brian Thomas Jr. was back for the Jags after missing a couple weeks, and credit for the Jaguars. They're like, this could have been a trap game. I always say that divisional games are a total toss-up, and credit to the Jags. They played well. They handedly beat one of their division opponents and are now 8-4. So to continue with the AFC South, the other AFC South divisional matchup, the Houston Texans going to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. The Colts obviously having a bit of a rough patch over the past couple of weeks. The Texans, who had gotten CJ Stroud back this week, were looking to kind of continue that winning streak that Davis Mills had started. The Texans were 6-5, I should say. The Colts were 8-3. So the Colts were leading the division and going into this game. Unfortunately for them, after a pretty hard fought, somewhat ugly, but well played in terms of like competition levels, I have to say. Maybe not in terms of like execution on every play, but like, it was a well well played overall game. As I struggle to find another adjective to put in there, but anyway, the Texans won 20-16. In a game that really shook up the AFC South standings. It turns out that Daniel Jones has been playing with like a broken leg or like a fractured something, like some kind of fractured bone in his leg for the past like 2 months, and he's just going to still play through it somehow. He didn't exactly play all that well in this game, and really the Colts as a whole looked okay. Definitely not the same as they had been. Alec Pierce looked good for the Colts, and it's not like they didn't look like they did against, say, the Steelers. They gave the ball to Jonathan Taylor 21 times, which was smart, but it was definitely not Jonathan Taylor's best performance. He only ended up with 85 yards. The big thing for the Colts, though, besides the loss, I should say, because that's the biggest part, but player-wise, the biggest news was that Sauce Gardner got injured early on in this game. I believe it's a calf strain for him, so he's going to be out for a few weeks. Don't know for how long, but it's a big blow for a big player that they just traded for. So really unfortunate circumstance there for the Colts. Really unlucky there. But What's bigger, though, is that they've now lost the division lead to Jacksonville. They have the same record, but tiebreaker-wise, Jacksonville now holds control of the AFC South. But don't count out the Texans whatsoever because they're one game back. They're 7-5. The Jags and Colts are 8-4. So in a division that, through the first like 5 or 6 weeks, or like even like 3 weeks ago, I'd say, it seemed like the Colts division to lose, and like really, like completely in their control. It is not that anymore. It is a 3-team race now for the AFC South, and that's going to be a fun one to watch going down the stretch here, because I think there's still a lot of divisional matchup left to go. And with Stroud back, and the Jags looking somewhat competent overall, more competent than not, I'd say, this could be really interesting. After that, we're gonna go back from the lone. We had a good game. Now to, well, I guess I wouldn't say this is a bad game. I'd say it's more a game between two teams that aren't making the playoffs, and the Saints going into Miami to take on the Dolphins. It was an ugly game, a very ugly game, but the Dolphins wound up winning 21-17 in a game that should not have been nearly as close as it was. The Colts were down a lot for most of it until they scored late. Then they scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter, went for two. Tyler Shuck, who had been playing in a kind of game overall, threw a pick 2 to Minkah Fitzpatrick because it was a 2-point conversion, and Minkah Fitzpatrick intercepted it and ran it all the way back for what is normally a pick 6 when it's on a normal play, but in this case it was a 2-point conversion, so it was instead a 2-point swing in the opposite direction. But then right after that, the Saints managed to recover the onside kick. They did not wind up scoring. They wound up trying a tush push on a 4th and 1 with it was like a minute 23 left to go, and they failed the tush push. It's once again Kellen Moore is the coach there, and he was obviously in Philly last year with the tush push. Blah 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 blah. I also forgot to mention the tush push incident in the Eagles game there. But anyway, the tush push failed for the Saints. Let me flash back to that Eagles. Or no, that was the Eagles Cowboys game. Never mind. I'm thinking about last week, which was last Sunday afternoon, not Monday night. But or was that this week? Hang on a minute. I will need to look this up. And okay, I did just look it up. It was a fumble. It wasn't in the Bears game. It was on a tush push, and Nashawn Wright, the cornerback for the Bears, stripped Jalen Hurts of the ball while he was still kind of falling forward. Anyway, that was the tush push drama. The weekly tush push drama was that Eagles fans are saying forward progress was stopped. There's a tongue twister right there. But it was not, and it was a fumble. Anyway, that was a brief sidetrack there to, because I was covering tush push drama because it's entertaining. But anyway, in the Saints Dolphins tush push, it just got stopped on the 4th and 1, and it lost the Saints the game. But overall, it was just it was a pretty it was a game that I wasn't really paying attention to all that much because, again, they're two teams that are well below 500 and very much out of the playoffs at this point. And it wasn't a super interesting game overall. Tua did not have a great game. Devon Achane had a good game, though. The Dolphins literally scored 1 touchdown and then just kicked field goals and had that pick 2. Devon Achane had 134 yards and a touchdown, so he's having a really good season. The rest of the Dolphins just have not, essentially. And the Saints, it seems like there's a little bit there with Tyler Shuck. I just think that with how they're going to end up record-wise this season, there's a decent chance they do go quarterback in the first round, because I think they would want to have a higher upside first-round quarterback than a lower upside second-round quarterback who's also 26, I'm pretty sure, 27. Really old for a rookie. Because I said it last week or 2 weeks ago that Shuck was the backup for Justin Herbert at Oregon in 2019, which is still mind-boggling to me. Anyway, so the Dolphins are 5-7, Saints are 2-10. I don't think either of them getting to the playoffs. I believe the Saints are eliminated from the playoffs at this point. If not, they probably should be. But I would have to assume the Saints are eliminated. The Miami Dolphins are probably not all that far behind, but they can still, like, they would probably win games to prolong that absence. But it's like they're in the like infinitesimal or infinitesimally small window to make it in. Now, to speaking of to move on to other teams that have basically no chance at making the playoffs, the Atlanta Falcons going into New York, technically New Jersey, to take on the Jets. Falcons were 4-7 going into this. The Jets were 2-9. And of all things, the Jets would win 27-24 in a game that I'm surprised did not get Raheem Morris fired, to be honest. I know he's using a backup quarterback in Kirk Cousins, but it's also Kirk Cousins. And honestly, Kirk Cousins didn't have a horrible game. He had 234 yards and a touchdown. Bijan Robinson also had 142 yards and a touchdown in this game. So Atlanta's offense wasn't really the problem in this game. I mean, it kind of was, but it was more their defense just had a really rough go of it somehow. Tyrod Taylor had a pretty solid game overall. The star of the show for the Jets, though, was actually A.D. Mitchell, Adonai Mitchell, the former Colts second-round pick who was a part of the Sauce Gardner trade, had 8 catches for 102 yards and a touchdown. And, you know, this is like, if Howie's going to play in this Jets offense, yeah, he could be a pretty nice addition for whoever the Jets wind up picking with their first round pick, because I have to imagine they go quarterback in the first round. But it was one where two bad teams going at it in a back and forth game that, you know, if you are a fan of the teams, it would be probably an enjoyable game to watch. And I mean, it was fine overall. It's just one that, like, not many people are really going to be caring about at this point in the season, because it's like, again, it's between two teams that are well below 500. So it's like, unless you're looking more at the tank bowl stats of like who's going to be picking first overall in the draft, or like how the top 10 is going to shake up, it's not a super important game. But in the end, the Jets would win on I think a 58-yard field goal made by Nick Folk, who is still in the league. And fun fact, as it was pointed out in the post-game locker room speech by Jets head coach Aaron Glenn actually played with Nick Folk back when he played football, which is absolutely insane to me, since Aaron Glenn has been retired for, I think, like 15 years at this point. It's like he is, like, it's similar to D'Amico Ryans, where like these guys played football in like the early 2000s essentially, and it's insane to me. Like, Nick Folk has been playing since 2007, and it's wild. I mean, I know kickers, you know, can play for a really long time, but it's still crazy that like the guy who's coaching him, that is his head coach, used to be his teammate. It's still crazy to me. So I mean, for the Jets, in the long run, I don't know if this is a great win for them, because again, draft position, but I mean, hey, morale wins are always nice, and I don't know if it's like between the 3rd pick or the 5th pick is really going to make too much of a difference for them this draft, but it could. Who knows? We won't really know that till A, after the season ends, and B, you know, off season towards the draft. But for now, it's I don't know. It doesn't help the Falcons at all that they lost, because again, they traded away their first round pick this in 2026 to the Rams to trade back in to select James Pierce Jr. So this is like the best case scenario for the Los Angeles Rams at the moment, where it's, you know, they just have I think right now it's a top 5 pick, which is crazy for a team that is one of the best in the league at the moment, though we'll get to them in a second. Actually going to be the next game I talk about. But yeah, it's like, in terms of probably the long run and draft position, this only really helps the Rams. Like, it doesn't help either of the teams in this game, but I mean, hey, it's good for the Jets. I'm happy for them. So yeah, now speaking of the Rams, because this game was very interesting to say the least, the Rams going into Carolina to take on the Panthers. And the Panthers have been having a very up and down season thus far, where they have some really big wins and some really big losses. They blow out Atlanta 30-0, but they also lose to New Orleans. And they were 6-6 going into this. The Rams were 9-2, and yet the Carolina Panthers, I almost said Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers, they won 31-28. And it was not only a win, it was probably the best game I've seen them play. I mean, maybe not counting that 30-0 win, but, compared to the level of competition, I'd say this might be the best game I've seen them play in the Bryce Young era. Like, it was, from start to finish, an incredible offensive performance by the Panthers. Bryce Young had probably one of his best games as a pro. He was being very efficient with the ball and being very precise. He threw two touchdowns in this game on fourth down, where he burnt Emmanuel Forbes for long touchdowns. Or I'd say he didn't burn them, but his receivers burnt Emmanuel Forbes, former Washington first-round pick at corner. But it's again, fourth down, and it was 30-40 yard bombs for touchdowns. So it was very, very impressive for Bryce Young. And credit the Panthers defense this game. Big props to them, because big story going into this game and throughout a lot of the season is that Matt Stafford had been extremely efficient with the football. It was going into this game, I think he had 30 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. So of course he throws 2 interceptions this game. One of them being a pick six. I think Stafford also fumbled in this game. I think a strip sack fumble. Let me actually double check to make sure. I know it was at least 2 interceptions, but it was 3 turnovers overall. Yes, it was 2 interceptions, also a fumble. And it was one where this is a Panthers defense that has kind of been much maligned over the past few years. And I mean, they still gave up 27 points, but this is a Rams offense that is hard to stop. But they capitalized on mistakes that Stafford and the Rams rarely make. And that's a big reason why the Panthers got away with a win here. Or came away with a win. I'm not saying they got away with it, because they earned this win. This was incredibly impressive. Chuba Hubbard kind of retook the starting running back role from Rico Dowdle. I don't know if they're just kind of playing the hot hand or whatnot, but Hubbard had 83 yards on 17 carries. I'm just very impressed with the Panthers. They're now 7-6, and they have a good shot at winning the division at this point. They're very much a team that has been up and down. I think they've won it. They've been going win loss over the past 6 weeks now. But this a lot of people were saying the Rams were the best team in football, and Panthers just beat them. So it's, again, really well done. This is definitely not the death of the Rams whatsoever. I think they're going to bounce back. They're still 9-3, but they still have to deal with San Francisco, who's 9-4, and Seattle now, who is after their win. I'm just going to say that they won, because I'll get to that in a sec. But Seahawks are also 9-3, so similar to the AFC South, that NFC West division is still very much up for grabs, and I am incredibly interested to watch and see how that division plays out, because it is 3 really strong teams going at it in this last month of football, and it's going to be really, really fun to watch. Now to flip over to another matchup between NFC South and NFC West teams, the Arizona Cardinals going into Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers would come away with a win in this game, 20-17, in a game that probably shouldn't have been as close as it was. But it was still, I'd say, the outcome that most people were expecting. Definitely record-wise, it was the expected outcome. The Buccaneers having a much better record than the Cardinals. It was definitely not Baker Mayfield's best game overall. Chris Godwin's been dealing with a lot of drops and just regression, which I think was kind of expected. A lot of people expected him to not play as well because of that, really major injury he had. But it's still unfortunate to see, because I always like Chris Godwin, so it just it sucks to see that he's just not playing nearly as well as he did before. Hopefully it's just still a rehabbing from injury type deal and not just flat regression. But he is also kind of getting up there in terms of age when it comes to football players. So I don't know. But either way, it it was one where the Bucks, they got Bucky Irving back, and it's clear they missed him because they ran him a lot and he ran well. And it was just kind of the Bucks just kind of outplayed the Cardinals by a little bit. Their defense played pretty solid overall. We had a thick six, or a fat guy touchdown, however you want to call it. Tristan Wirfs, the offensive tackle, the like superstar offensive tackle for the Buccaneers, caught a touchdown pass on the trick play, which is cool. But yeah, it was Baker. I don't know. I honestly don't know how he's playing with that like dislocated shoulder or whatever he has, that he suffered last week in that game. So credit to Baker. He always seems to play through hardships. I don't know if it's always the correct call, but he played well enough in this game. The Buccaneers as a whole played well enough this game. And it was another one-score loss for the Cardinals, but Jacoby Brissett had another pretty solid game overall, and it's just kind of how these two teams seem to be playing a lot, where the Bucks tend to win a lot of close games, and the Cardinals tend to lose a lot of close games. So the Cardinals are 3-9. I wouldn't be too surprised if they basically blow it up at the end of the season, just because of how it's gone. Because it's just been so underwhelming for them in the Jonathan Gannon, Kyler Murray era. The Bucks, I mean, they're still pretty streaky and have a lot of their issues, but they're winning the division. But they got to deal with the Panthers at the moment. But I think they have the inside track. They just got to stay a little healthy. I think Mike Evans is coming back somewhat soon, and it's a little close at the moment, and should be another interesting division race. Now for the second of the late afternoon games the first of the late afternoon games for this week, the Minnesota Vikings going into Seattle to take on the Seahawks, and this was one where J.J. McCarthy was in concussion protocol, so we got a Max Brosmer start, an undrafted free agent quarterback, and it did not go well at all. Because it was Nathan Peterman starting for the Buffalo Bills back in like 2017 levels, or 2018, whenever it was, like that levels of bad. If anyone remembers, he threw 5 interceptions against the Chargers in one half in his first ever start in that game. Brosmer did not throw 5 interceptions in one half. He did the Vikings did commit 5 turnovers in this game, I believe. He might have actually thrown 5 turnovers or thrown 5 interceptions. Period. Okay, it was only 4. I say only 4. It was still 4. One of them being a pick six and like one of the worst throws I've seen ever, where like it was a 4th and goal or like 4th and something on in the red zone, and there's immediate pressure. Brosmer was kind of falling back, getting kind of brought to the ground, and he sort of underhand tossed it out right in the arms of a Seahawks defender who ran it. I might have been Reek Woolen, I don't remember for sure, but he ran it back for a pick six, and the Seahawks won 26-0 in a game that was never close, and the Vikings, I guess, need J.J. McCarthy back. I know McCarthy has not played well, and there's a higher chance than not that he is not a good quarterback, but he's definitely going to be better than Max Brosmer because, wow, it was really, really bad. I don't know if this is going to add fuel to the fire of Justin Jefferson wanting out, but yeah, this is a bad look for the Vikings because, again, they're also going up against Sam Darnold, who that led them to that 14-win season last year. They let him walk because they had McCarthy waiting in the wings, and Darnold Seahawks just did this to them. So, yeah, it was not good. And I know the Vikings were missing a couple offensive linemen, but I don't think even with a fully healthy offensive line they would have done any better because it was just bad overall. So the Vikings fall to 4-8 in a lost season completely, and they're in probably one of the worst situations in the league at the moment, or like one of the like bottom tier situations where they had a quarterback that worked well in their system, let him walk for a guy that might work in their system, might not. We're not sure because McCarthy's still only played like six or like what 7, 8 games now in his career and hasn't really looked good in any of them. Yeah, it's rough to say the least for the Vikings. The Seahawks though, they're in pretty good shape at the moment. They are looking pretty. Now for the second late afternoon game, the I almost said Oakland Raiders. I don't know why I said that. I guess because of like I've had a lot of older football on my mind, but the Las Vegas Raiders going into San. And I said San Diego. Yes. Well, it was at one point the Oakland Raiders and San Diego Chargers. It is now the Las Vegas Raiders going to LA to take on the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm just in like full 2018 mode at the moment for some reason. Not in 2018 because Chargers were in LA at that point. Like full 2015 mode or something. I don't know. Anyway, the Raiders and Chargers played AFC West divisional matchup, and this was also pretty one-sided. The Chargers won 31-14. Once again, the Raiders offense just does not look all that good. Geno Smith had I'd say one of his better games in the sense that he didn't look terrible. He only looked kind of bad. He threw for 165 yards, 2 touchdowns, and interception, got sacked 5 times for 40 yards. So it wasn't good, but it's sadly better than like a decent number of his other performances in this game. Kamani Vidal had another good game for the Chargers. He's filling in nicely while Najee Harris and Amarian Hampton have been injured. And yeah, it's just it was a whatever game. To be honest, it was pretty slow for a while. The Raiders just didn't get much going on. Brock Bowers had both touchdown catches, and his second one was like legitimately one of the best catches of the year. It was insane. I should also highlight Puka Nacua in the Rams game had an insane catch in that game as well. But we haven't even gotten to the best catch of the week. We're going to get to that in a little bit. And yeah, it was just it was a game. It wasn't all that interesting. Chargers are 8-4, so they I know they've been dealing with a lot of injuries, but they're 8-4. I just think they're going to struggle against really high end teams, especially teams with good pass rushes because of the offensive line injuries that they have. Both Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater being out for the season. But in this one, this was one of the better games the Chargers have played in a while. It seems to be that whenever they play the division, the Chargers seem to play well this year, but outside of that, they struggle. Now for the last game in the late afternoon window, the Buffalo Bills, who have been having a little bit of a rough stretch over the past couple weeks, going into Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers, who have also not exactly had the best stretch of games. And that stretch of games for the Steelers, at least, I should say bad stretch of games, is continuing as the Steelers legitimately put on one of the worst offensive performances I've seen in a good while out of them. And that's saying something because the Steelers have had pretty lackluster offenses for a good while. They only scored 7 points. The Bills won 26-7. And the Bills were missing both their starting offensive tackles in this game, yet they still won pretty handily. Aaron Rodgers was starting this game. He didn't start last week because of the fractured hand. He was starting this week. He did not play well. Really, no one on the Steelers offense played well. Their wide receivers did not play well. Not that they have too many good ones. Their run game could get nothing going. Their offensive line did not play well. Aaron Rodgers did not play well. Rodgers even had a post-game interview where he was just trashing his wide receivers. So, Steelers fans are starting to get deja vu to 2018, their star quarterback and longtime veteran going out and publicly trashing his wide receiver core in a very middling season. It's like 2018 Ben Roethlisberger never left. There's just a little bit less drama going on in that season for the Steelers, but people were chanting fire Tomlin in this game. People were booing Renegade, and I follow Urinating Tree on Twitter, who's a big Steelers fan, and he was saying Steelers fans never boo Renegade. That is their song, and they were booing it a lot, and that is, big eye opener there. If the Steelers fans are starting to get fed up with the Steelers song. Yeah, so this is like, it's starting to get rock bottom here for the Steelers, where like they just don't seem to have anything clicking on offense, and their defense just cannot like hold the fort down. They're 6-6. The Ravens have leapt them, or I'd say more leapfrog them in the division, and now the Bengals are suddenly back in contention, sort of. So this is like starting to get to DEFCON 1 for the Steelers here. For the Bills, big bounce back game for them to like have a good, solid, like uneventful, like no stress type of win, and to get another win in the AFC to try and just keep up with the Patriots. They're 8-4, and just to keep up in the playoff race, because it's been a season where they've lost a couple of games they should have won, and in a season that's been has a very competitive AFC. It's a game they desperately needed to win, and they did. So really good for the Bills there. A couple other player transactions to note after this game. So the Minnesota Vikings released, or I say waived, Adam Thielen, who they traded for in the offseason for a 4th-round pick from the Panthers. So pretty bad trade there. He had like 19 total yards or something like that. He basically did nothing for the Vikings, unfortunately, which it always sucks to see because I was like when players reunite with their old team after a long while, and Thielen, who started his career in Minnesota, was there for a while, then went to Carolina. Unfortunately, just did not work out because it's for basically like, I mean, again, the Vikings passing attack has been struggling mightily this whole season. But so as it concerns the Steelers-Bills game, the Steelers have claimed Adam Thielen off of waivers. Don't know if it's going to last or anything, but it's just something to look out for. Like, that is his landing spot. And then the other transaction note is that the Steelers, who had claimed Asante Samuel Jr., who former Los Angeles Chargers draft pick, I think 2nd-round pick, who dealt with like a major neck injury, kept him out for a year and a half, and was a free agent. The Steelers had signed him in their practice squad. They now are elevating him, or I'd say promoting him fully from the practice squad to the active roster, and by extension releasing cornerback Darius Slay. Big play Slay, who they signed in the offseason. Slay had gotten cut by the Eagles, had bounced between the Eagles or had played for the Lions, then went to the Eagles. I think went back to the Lions, then went back to the Eagles or something like that. But in this case, Darius Slay is no longer on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just like he seems to have fallen off completely. So sucks there, but Steelers now have Asante Samuel Jr. instead. Anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent, but got through it. The second to last game, the Sunday night game, was the Denver Broncos, who were 9-2, going into Washington to take on the Commanders. The Commanders were 3-8, and I've detailed a lot of the Commanders this season. But the Commanders were coming off their bye, and the week before that, they had played the Dolphins and lost in overtime. But they played a lot better, in my opinion, where Dan Quinn had taken over defensive play calling duties, and it was clear that it was going a lot better than how it did under Joe Witt. In that game against the Dolphins, Mariota did not have a very good game. This game was another Marcus Mariota start, as Jaden Daniels has been back and practicing, or at least back at practice, but he's not been cleared for contact. It's clear he wants to play. He just has not been cleared quite yet. So it was another Marcus Mariota start, and it was really outside of one really, really terrible interception where Mariota claims to have been throwing it out of bounds. I don't know if I believe him, because it was not really, it didn't have nearly enough to get it out of bounds, but it was a really bad interception on a drive that should have netted in points because it was like outside, like pretty close to the red zone. Mariota actually had a pretty solid game overall. This is a really fun game. The Broncos would win 27-26 in overtime, and a game that, as a Commanders fan, I've kind of accepted that the season's over. Like, there was a chance that where if they won this and had some help, they could like potentially sneak into a division win, but it was like way outside, and it would need like Jaden Daniels to come back immediately and then everything to go right, and it probably wasn't going to happen. But So like I still wanted to see a win because I don't like seeing my team lose, but this is the whole like quote unquote ethical tanking kind of win where it's like they played well, they looked good. This was probably the best I've seen Washington look maybe all season, to be honest. Like probably since that week 1 win against the Giants, or actually no, I'd say since the Chargers game that they had where they completely dominated the Chargers. This is the best game I've seen them play since that. And coincidentally, the last time they won a game as well. But it was one where I'm happy with how they played. I don't mind the loss because it helps with draft position because they're now Commanders, I think, are picking 6th overall if the draft were to happen today. It could still totally fluctuate, but it's overall, I am not unhappy with this result whatsoever. Terry McLaurin was back in this game, and it's clear that when he is back, the offense is significantly better because he just has a presence. His presence alone just opens up so much for the rest of the offense. Since he just draws a lot of attention, and it's very impressive, how well he plays. And he was on a snap count in this game, and still went 6 catches for 93 yards and a touchdown, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, I'm so happy to have him back because he is my favorite player, just in football at the moment. The Commanders also just as a whole looked a lot more competent on both sides of the ball. There were definitely moments where the defense looked like the old defense from early in the season. They gave up a 2-minute drill touchdown at the end of the first half where Bo Nix had probably his best drive of the night. That and the overtime drive, I'd say, were pretty similar, where the Broncos just marched down the field with their passing attack and scored a touchdown. But overall, it was one where the Commanders' defense played significantly better. It was why am I blanking on his name? But it was just overall a much better, well executed game. I'd say the scheme was a lot better, and just the play, it felt like wasn't nearly as much confusion. The Commanders got Will Harris back at safety, and it's clear he's a good communicator and leader on the defense. And the Commanders' run defense was playing really well. They were just completely stuffing the Broncos' rushing attack and forced Purdy to throw it. Wound up throwing it 45 times. The caveat of being in overtime, although even then he only threw probably 4 or 5 times at most in overtime. It was. I was impressed with how the Commanders' defense played, even if they did give up 27 points to a somewhat mediocre offense. I wouldn't say Bo Nix had the best game in the world. He threw a really bad interception directly to Bobby Wagner in the fourth quarter. And the fourth quarter was pretty interesting because the Broncos have this season been one of the best fourth quarter teams just in general. And they got completely shut down in the fourth quarter. Their offense could do nothing. And the Commanders were just able to hang into it for most of this game. And it was just very impressive overall. I'm also not going to discount the Broncos because they played a pretty solid game as well. But it's a little worrying that a team that is now 10-2 struggled this much against a Commanders team that is, pretty much out of contention. The Broncos did get Pat Surtain II and also Alex Singleton back. Alex Singleton had been dealing with testicular cancer or something like that and was out for I think 11 weeks. And Surtain had been out for 5 or 6, or maybe not 5 or 6 weeks, but a good couple weeks as well. And it's clear that their presence was felt throughout this entire game. Singleton had a really nice pass breakup on a long third down pass late in the fourth quarter that Zach Ertz probably should have had, but it was a good play by Singleton. Ertz did have a good game overall. However, he had 10 catches for 106 yards. But the biggest thing, or the biggest story coming out of this game in terms of Commanders receivers was good old Treylon Burks, the former first-round pick from the Titans, who was supposed to be that replacement for A.J. Brown after they traded him away. Burks, who got picked up on waivers by the Commanders a few weeks ago, had legitimately the catch of the season. Like he basically pulled an OBJ where he had like full extension leaping into the air, like fingertip type of catch over his shoulder while he's like being kind of dragged down by Riley Moss. It was one of the most insane catches I've ever seen. And it was just one where like I had to sit up in my chair like, oh my goodness, this is a thing. Like I started to believe again, and belief and hope is a dangerous thing. But it was I really hope the Commanders keep Traylon Burks around because he's a really big body guy, and I think he provides a nice dynamic in this offense, like especially if he can get more reps and like get worked into it more, because I'm enjoying what I'm seeing so far out of him in the Commanders offense. One other not so fun thing to talk about in this game is the refereeing, because this was one of the worst games, officiated games I've seen in a good while. On both sides, I should say, because like both teams benefited from a lot of really bad calls or non-calls. Like there was a lot, like it felt like the first 3 quarters of the game, there were basically being no penalties called when there probably should have been. Laramie Tunsil was getting away with a lot of borderline false starts. It was pretty similar to what Jawan Taylor does on the Chiefs, where like his get off is like right when the ball gets snapped, so it can sometimes look like he's false starting. There was just this weird instance where I think it was Nick Bonito was in a quote unquote pile where it was like him and I think Tyler Biadasz were like kind of on top, or Biadasz was like on the foot of like one of the Broncos players who was like on his knees essentially. And Bonito came in and basically pulled Biadasz off of his teammate's foot, which drew a flag because you're not allowed to pull someone off of a pile. But it's there, like even I think it was Gene Steratore, who was the rules analyst for Sunday Night Football, but whoever the rules analyst was talking about it is like, yeah, it's the letter of the rule book is that it's a pile. I don't think one person is a pile, and I'm sitting there like, yeah, it's probably they probably shouldn't have thrown that because it's not a pile, it's just one person. And like right after that, Bonito got blasted from behind by Laramie Tunsil, and it's like everyone was expecting Tunsil to get the flag, but it was actually Bonito. It was a mess, but overall it was just a weird one. Then there's the final drive in the fourth quarter with the Commanders where it was like they had Terry McLaurin have a phantom false start called on him where like he's literally standing still. Like he gets set. He's set for a full second. The ball gets snapped and they call a false start on him for some reason. And then the play after that, Marcus Mariota gets pressured and throws the ball away well beyond the line of scrimmage in the direction of someone who is outside of the numbers, which by rule is not intentional grounding, yet they called it intentional grounding anyway, so it was a 3rd and 25. The Commanders proceeded to then convert that third and 25 in 2 plays, which was very impressive, but it was insane. There was also a play like a couple plays before that where Marcus Mariota got sacked, he got tripped, fell, got up because it kind of looked like he went down on his own and didn't get brought down by a Broncos player and ran for a first down. Instead, replay assist came in, reviewed it, and said that his knee was down, and it was like a big sack, like a 10, 12-yard sack essentially. But the reason why his knee was down, because the Broncos, it might have been Nick Bonito again, I think it was Nick Bonito, literally tripped him, and like, which is a penalty, but they couldn't call it because you cannot throw it, like retroactively throw a flag via replay, which is kind of dumb. And it's just like Broncos fans were on Twitter and stuff complaining about some like penalties that should have gone in favor of the Broncos, and the Commanders were doing the same, or Commanders fans were doing the same. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, like the refs were so bad on both sides. Like both teams got away with a lot more than they should have. And it was just an incredibly poorly refereed game and kind of a black eye on a game that overall was very entertaining. And so the Broncos are now 10-2. Maybe not the best 10-2 in the world, because I'd say they haven't won, or they definitely struggled a bit here and there. Their defense is obviously really good. Their offense, however, has a lot of issues. But I mean, again, they're 10-2, have good control of the AFC West. There's just still some question marks going on as this season starts to wind down. Commanders are 3-9. We might see Jaden Daniels back next week, but overall, they look significantly better than they did like 4 or 5 weeks ago. Like compared to those Seahawks and Lions games, this is a completely different team. Now then, after that long-winded recap, from a very fun primetime game to a very one-sided primetime game. The Monday night game was the New York Giants going into New England to take on the Patriots. Obviously, plenty of memories there between those two teams. Grumble, grumble, the Giants winning 2 Super Bowls off the Patriots with Eli Manning. And I guess for some reason, Eli just kind of made a deal with the devil to win those championships because I guess all that anger was being taken out of the Giants in this game because it was like everything was just going wrong for the Giants in this game. They were getting just like demolished by the Patriots. Like the Patriots were out for blood in this game. Like Jackson Dart got absolutely destroyed on a sideline run where he was still in bounds, and it was like he was kind of going out of bounds, but it was still very much inbounds. And the Patriots, it was either safety or linebacker. I think it was Nick Ellis is who it was. Just lit up Jackson Dart, like just destroyed him. And then there's another moment with Nick Ellis again, where it was on a kickoff return where Gunnar Olszewski was returning the ball, got hit by another Patriots defender in the chest, and then Ellis was kind of coming in from a different angle, and the ricochet or like the redirection from getting hit in the chest basically caused Ellis to go helmet to helmet with Olszewski and basically just knocked him out completely, caused him to fumble the ball. They didn't call the helmet to helmet, which they should have, but they didn't. And the Patriots got a score out of that. But even with that, this was very much a Patriots all the way type of game. They won 33-15. This game was not very close. It took like a couple drives for the Patriots to get going, but after it, they did. Drake May looks really good. Hunter Henry looks really good in this offense. And just overall, it was one where the Patriots just outplayed the Giants. Special teams especially was all in favor of the Patriots. Marcus Jones, their cornerback / punt returner, had another punt return for a touchdown. And then there's also the funniest, probably the funniest moment this week happened where the Giants were lining up for a field goal. Who their kicker is now Younghoe Koo, formerly of the Atlanta Falcons, and also I believe back when it was San Diego, but the former Charger, San Diego / LA. But Koo, who had gotten cut after I think week 1, it was like week 1 or week 2, he got cut, and is now on the Giants. The Giants, who Graham Gano, who's their usual kicker, has been injured, and so it feels like year after year they've been dealing with kicker inconsistencies. Younghoe Koo, just the latest in that line. And so anyway, he was lining up for a kick, and the whole process looked good. Like the snap was good, the hold was good. Koo went up to kick it, and his kicking leg, like his foot, basically went down in the usual motion, and instead of hitting the ball, it basically hit like a solid 1.5 feet behind the football, just jammed right into the ground, and he just completely missed it because of it. Like it's like if you're playing golf and you're going to hit the ball, but instead of hitting it flush, you just chunk it like 2 inches behind the ball. That's what Koo did, and it caused the holder, I think Jamie Gilliam, to try and pull it out and like pull the ball and try to scramble around and make a play. Did not happen, but it was just like legitimately never seen that happen before in a field goal attempt. Like I don't know how, as a professional kicker, you legitimately miss the ball by kicking your foot short. Like it's a new inventive way to mess up, and of course it just happens to be the Giants. So I wouldn't say there's much to write home about for the Giants this week, other than Jackson Dart not getting injured, which is good, despite taking a pretty nasty hit, legal hit, but nasty nonetheless. Tyrone Tracy got injured in this game, and it was 30-7 by the end of the half. So like it was just over by then. And Patriots are now 11-2, and not only atop the AFC East, not only atop the AFC, but atop the NFL as a whole. So if you would have said to someone at the start of the season that the top 3 teams in the NFL by Thanksgiving are the Patriots at 11-2, the Broncos at 10-2, and the Chicago Bears, the NFC leading, not NFC North, NFC leading Chicago Bears at 9-3, I would not have believed you. But I mean, that's just kind of how the season's going. Like, it's absolutely crazy. And it certainly doesn't make me bitter at all that 3 teams with quarterbacks in the 2024 NFL draft are the top 3 in the league. And of course, Jaden Daniels just happens to have the season where he's dealing with a bunch of fluke injuries, and the team as a whole just, yeah. I've ranted about how Washington's misfortune this season already, so you don't have to hear my sob story about that. But it's just a little bit of a grumble there. But I mean, hey, it's that 2024 QB draft class looks insane outside of maybe JJ McCarthy and maybe Michael Penix, depending on how he comes back from injury. But I mean, even with May, Daniels, I guess Caleb Williams, like May and Daniels are clearly the top 2. Then it's definitely Caleb Williams and Bo Nix, who are like good but still need development. Like May and Daniels are there already. Like both of them are clearly starting caliber NFL quarterbacks with more upside to them. Like they are elite. Caleb Williams and Bo Nix are good, but still need some more time in the oven to really get to that next level, to get to the level of Drake May and Jaden Daniels. And then you have Penix and McCarthy, who just have not played enough, either through injury or just like being the backup or whatever. But even when they're playing, it's like they show flashes, but still a lot of room to grow there. I would put Penix over McCarthy at the moment because McCarthy it's the sense that Penix has looked okay. Like there's definitely good, definitely bad, but overall I'd say okay. And whereas McCarthy has looked bad. Like there's been some good, but overall been bad. But it's also still not even 2 full years into their careers. For some, not even a full year into their like starting careers. So it's still, there's still plenty of room to grow there. Anyway, that does it for week 13. A very fun week. And once again, another week where it's like, you just can't predict anything reliably. I'm really looking forward to how this last month is going to wind up. I am praying on an Eagles downfall. I want to see it happen so bad. I want to see them just completely choke out the division. I would love nothing more than to watch both the Eagles and the Chiefs miss the playoffs this year. That would be so funny. I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be very funny if it did. Anyway, as for my plans going forward, I will have another episode of Worship Wednesdays out tomorrow on Wednesday. It is the editing process for that for episode 2 is nearly done. I basically just need to record the intro and the outro and edit them in. I've got like the bulk of it done. I basically just need to do intro, outro, and make a thumbnail and then publish. But that's going to be I'm probably just going to do that after I publish this episode. After that, I have some projects in the works because I'm looking to shift more into video making rather than pure podcast making. So I'm not sure if there's going to be an episode on Saturday. I'm going to try and get one out if I can get around to it and if I find a good topic to talk about. But keep an eye out in this next week or so for my first big project, I'd say, because I don't know if it's actually going to happen just because it's like a lot of it's still hypothetical in the sense of like the thing that I want to do hasn't come out yet. And it's coming out very soon in a couple of days, actually. Hint, hint. But what I want to do with it is something that I have not done yet. And there's some stuff I need to get, some stuff I need to work out, but it's overall one where I have a good idea of what I want to do, and it's something I'm very excited to do. So we'll see how that goes. Keep an eye out for, my guess is probably the first episode of that is going to go up probably sometime over the weekend, I think. That's my initial plan. I don't know how it's actually going to turn out, but that's the initial plan. But yeah, just keep an eye out for it because there could be something big for this channel going forward. I do have another project. That one I'm actually going to say what it is. I'm going to try and do a Fire Emblem Three Houses character summary video rather than podcast episode on it. I'm going to try and do a very heavily edited video. That's one that is like still in the scripting phase because I'm everything so far that I've done on both podcasting and or for the most part, everything that I've done, podcasting and YouTube, has been largely unscripted with like a little bit of scripting here and there. Nothing like I've not done anything fully scripted yet. And that's like an adjustment I'm still making because the scripting process has been a bit tedious so far. But it's one where the first part of it is going to be a video on the Black Eagles characters. So the 8 students in that house. And that I don't know when that's going to go up. It's not for probably a couple weeks, but that is another big project that is on the horizon for what I want to do for my YouTube channel. Obviously, the podcast is still going to be running. Next episode, if I don't come up with something on Saturday, it's going to be week 14 for the recap there. I think at this point you can kind of expect that every Tuesday is going to be the NFL recap. But yeah, that's the initial plans. This episode did run a little bit longer than usual, but that's also because we had all 32 teams play this week. But yeah, that's it for that. That's it for this week. I thank you very much for listening, and I hope you tune in next time.